And really quickly, I just want to go over and orient you to why we're here, who the office is. So the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency, which you can just call the Resilience Office for short, was established by voters in 2016. And our mandate is really to green city operations, to make sure that we are promoting resilient communities, especially along our coastlines, which are increasingly vulnerable. This is a point of pride. Coordinate with federal and state agencies. I love that tonight we have Cynthia Resentes in the room, who's at the neighborhood board chair level, right, in Nanakuli. We have city and county. Oh, and Keone Dudley, right? Are you chair now? Recently, right? For the local neighborhood board here. Councilmember Pine co-hosting this at the city level. We have Senator Gabbard here from the state level. I saw a Tulsi shirt in the back. I don't know if you're with Tulsi's office, but hey, we've got Tulsi in the room from the federal level.
Just fabulous.
But I mean, it's that kind of coordination at all of those levels of government in order to tackle what is the biggest challenge to humankind. So I'm glad that we're actually encapsulating in the room tonight exactly what our office is meant to do, is coordinate and leverage and make sure we're bringing the funding that we need to tackle this from all those levels. But this is really the heart and soul of what we see our task, which is reduce climate emissions, carbon pollution emissions, and then reduce our exposure to the impact of climate change. Our office is really to promote and protect public safety and property in the face of what's a looming challenge that we'll talk about. Our office is set up a little bit differently within the city than others. We're kind of a startup within government. And what we see that the need to actually work beyond government, city, county government is not going to be able to solve this problem on its own. Neither is state, neither is the feds, neither is the private sector. So we see ourselves as having to work across all those in order to lift this canoe together, because it's going to be a huge and heavy lift. So actually that really is reflected by the fact that almost half of our funding and support comes from outside the city. So for every tax dollar at the city, county level that's allocated to our office, we've actually got support from private funding and from in-kind and from federal as well. So our focus in the office is really on three things. The first is implement the Paris Climate Agreement here locally. So people often talk about every single country in the planet is in the Paris Climate Agreement except for the United States. That is not entirely true. So we have over 400 cities and counties. We have 17 states which have committed to stay in the Paris Climate Agreement. And when you add up the economic activity and the population of those 17 states and those 400 communities, it's actually about half of the US being covered. So you can think about the US only having taken a half step out of the Paris Climate Agreement, because along with every single mayor and the governor here in the state, we are still in the Paris Climate Agreement. But we have to do things in order to honor that commitment. And that's what we're here for tonight. This is the first step in making sure that we stay in and uphold our obligations under the Paris Climate Agreement. And then we want to lead by example, right? So it's not enough for the city to say, we got to do something about this. The city and county has to put forward real solutions. We're prototyping electric buses. We're doing LED streetlight retrofits all throughout the city to make sure that we're reducing our emissions and also saving money for taxpayers. And then finally, we've got to put the plans in place in order to get there. This is going to be a long, decades-long sort of path to get to what in the end is a better, cheaper, cleaner, safer economy. But we've got a lot of steps to go through. And so developing a resilience strategy, which we'll release in the first quarter of next year, developing this climate action plan, which is a component of that strategy, are the steps to getting there, which is what our office is tackling. We can't wait for a plan to come out. This, as you've seen in the news lately, especially with the release of the latest climate report, the fires in California, the hurricanes, if we wait for every single perfect report to come out, we're going to be behind the ball. And so what we've started doing, even before we've gotten this planning process done, is what are the low-hanging fruit that we know we've got to be pushing out there. And a lot of this stuff happened well before the office was established, right? Bikie Bike Share, now the 8th largest bike share in the entire nation. They've done over 1 million rides, huge latent demand in just the first year for that. And then I talked about the LED lights, but then also right here, just down the street at Pokai Bay, with Nainoa Thompson, on Hokulea, all 4 mayors came together to say we are committing to completely getting fossil fuels out of our ground transportation system. We cannot continue to burn fossil fuels and expect that we are going to be able to remain in an island community in a livable way. So there's the resilience strategy, which is sort of encompasses a little bit broader realm than just the climate action plan. There's 4 prongs to that. I would invite you at the end of the meeting, we've got a board back here in the corner by the table that talks about the different areas. There's 4 of them besides climate. And we would invite you to give your suggestions about ways to address the other 4 areas. And those 4 areas are long-term affordability for cost of living in the islands, the climate resilience piece, making sure that our community connectivity is as strong as possible, and then also making sure that we're prepared for natural disasters. Oops, sorry. So, and this is where we get to the communities piece. So we went around, in the first year of the office, we went to every single neighborhood board on the island. And we wanted to introduce what the office is, but also start to get people's perceptions about what are the things that we should make sure we build into a resilience strategy. We asked people, what makes you most proud to be a member of the Oahu community, to live here? And these are the responses we got in a word cloud, right? So you can see the stuff that's up there is not, oh, you know, I like, you know, infrastructure, or I like my house, or I like this or that. It was all about the softer spirit stuff, right? So Hokulea, community, the aloha spirit. Those are the things that, the people that live here, right? And it really struck us because, in fact, the #1 tool for resilience is not sort of hardened infrastructure or any of those things. It's actually connectivity. And this has been proven time and again. When you look at Hurricane Sandy, when you look at Fukushima disaster, when you look at Hurricane Katrina, the neighborhoods that bounced back the fastest weren't the richest neighborhoods or the ones that lived in the most, you know, durable structures. They were the neighborhoods where the neighbors knew each other well and came to each other's aid and took each other in. And so I think that's, you know, been the #1 sort of lesson out of this process is if we're going to develop resilience, we can't just think technically, we have to think community. So, for climate. So this is a shot from the inside, right? This little thin blue line that you see is the actual atmosphere that separates us from space. So we think of the heavens as sort of infinite, right? But it's actually quite thin. This is relative to the thickness of a skin on an apple. This is only 10 miles. So if you jump in your car here and, I don't know, drive out to the end, I don't know, by Makua, that's, if you drove up, that's as far as you would go before you start leaving the atmosphere. And that atmosphere is the only thing that keeps us sort of regulated and protected around the temperature that we live in.
The Earth's atmosphere is a mixture of gases. Some are known as greenhouse gases. That's because they trap heat from the sun and warm the Earth.
Sorry. Can you hear it?
That's good, because without greenhouse gases, our planet would freeze, and life as most of us know it would be impossible. These greenhouse gases, mainly water vapor and carbon dioxide, naturally cycle between the land and atmosphere and ocean. And over the ages, these greenhouse gases have reached a delicate balance that results in temperatures that we like a lot. It's been that way for thousands of years, until the last 150 years. That's when people began burning fossil fuels. Those fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, contain carbon that's been locked away from the natural cycle for eons. But when we burn them, that carbon joins with oxygen to make carbon dioxide that goes into the atmosphere. It throws the natural balance out of whack. The more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the more heat that is trapped, and the warmer it gets. And the warmer it gets, the more the climate changes, and the higher the ocean will rise. The more we learn about carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, the better we can deal with the changes caused by global warming. Because good planets are hard to find.
Okay, so this is just a really quick overview of the issue from from NASA. And what it really brings up is there's a lot of science behind this, right? There's like carbon dioxide and this and that. It might be easier to think of it from an example that you can understand pretty well, right? Which is, you go into Foodland, you park your car in the parking lot, you come back out 45 minutes later. How warm is it in your car relative to outside? It's scorching, right? You gotta roll down your windows as fast as you can. So, if you think about that blanket over the earth that we saw, that atmosphere that you could see through as the windows of the car, that's exactly the same thing. So we're in there, we're inside the car, the light can come in through the window because it's transparent, but the heat can't escape because that thickness of window is holding the heat in, and it gets warmer and it gets warmer. And every time we burn fossil fuels or run our cars on gasoline, that thickness of the window gets a little thicker, the blanket gets a little thicker, and so it holds in more heat. And that's what's happening, is essentially we're sitting in that car getting a little warmer. And it wouldn't be, the end of the world if it was just that it's a little hotter. What happens is that heat caused by this thickening sort of blanket is translating into a bunch of different energy changes within our atmosphere. So the first thing is we recognize it's getting warmer, and it's getting warmer because one of the reasons is, anybody recognize that it's like a little bit more muggy, we don't have as many trade winds as we used to have? That's been happening since the 70s now, so it's been this slow downgrading of the trade winds, both in terms of trade wind days. We've dropped from 280 trade wind days a year in the 70s to about 210 on average now, but also the winds have dropped in their speed around trade winds. The other thing that happens when you have a lot of energy or heat locked inside one car or one Earth is that energy has to express itself somehow. So this is a picture of Hurricane Olivia. Remember Hurricane Olivia this year, September, I think it was? We had so many this year, it's hard to keep track, right? So Hurricane Olivia was, at the time that it was barreling towards Hawaii, was only one of 9 huge storm systems around the globe. This is not normal, right? This is the new abnormal, as they're calling it, to have that many storms of that intensity bouncing their way around the Earth. So we're seeing more storm activity as well as a result of global warming. What we're also seeing is what the video talks about in terms of the sea level rise, the slight change in the direction of the wave patterns. And this is North Shore, this is Ehukai, right? You guys have seen this on the news. And you can see sort of how the entire coastline is draped in these big black cloths. They call them sand burritos that they're putting in as temporary protection. But it really looks like the beach is in mourning, right? And these black draperies, and that's what's actually happening is when we put a seawall, it's sentencing the beach to death. So seawalls and beaches cannot coexist. So to the extent that we have recreational areas, we have our baby luau on beaches, our tourists come to visit beaches, to the extent that we stay put and put up walls, that means we're not going to have a beach there for the future. It also means that we get this kind of thing. So you can see up in cloudless sky, so there's no rain. All of this flooding in Mapunapuna is not coming from rain, it's coming from high tide. So this was an area that historically was always low-lying, and the reason it was low-lying is because we filled it. So this whole area here, which is Mapunapuna, used to be marshland or like near-shore water area, but we've filled it with fill. And at the time, we filled it high enough to get above sea level. But we only filled it to the minimum because why stop, why go higher? The problem is now as sea level is starting to rise, that fill is not high enough to keep out the high tides. And then the erosion, we're seeing this, this is a city and county park where we're seeing the shower falling in, the erosion is coming in, and that is the higher sea level rise as well. We've experienced already about 6 inches of sea level rise, and it's going to be tracking higher. This is the other one This was the rain bomb. Remember the rain bomb in April that happened East Hawaii? This also was the one that hit Kauai, where my brother lives in Kalihi Valley, and all the houses on the other side of the gravel road from him were taken out completely. So he had, a young mom with her 4-year-old come pounding on his door at 4 in the morning because her house had just gotten swept away because 50 inches of rain fell in 24 hours on Kauai. That's the most rain that has ever fallen in recorded history in the United States of America. So you can see that we're coming up with new terms, rain bombs, because it's a completely new weather phenomenon. And the reason is because a warmer atmosphere can actually hold more moisture just because of the sort of the size of droplets, and it can dump more in an instant. And it's not just here in Hawaii, so this is being seen worldwide. Worldwide weather catastrophes have tripled since 1980 to today. So there's been this ramping up of big, again, energy expressing itself in these sort of violent storm events. What's important to recognize is that when you look at who is emitting all of this carbon pollution, these are the major, industrialized economies, it doesn't map to who's going to be most impacted across the world. So we got to think about what's the justice element around, what is our obligation, obviously, around trying to decarbonize our economy so that we're not impacting other people, but recognizing also that in the same moment, we are in this band. You see that the folks that are going to get hit first and worst are not only the equatorial regions, but island communities like ours. And then when you look at sort of the island itself, it's sort of a microcosm of that. The folks who produce the least emissions stand to get harmed the worst. So the most vulnerable communities, socioeconomic communities, elderly, young, those are the folks that tend, like in a heat wave, elderly are the most susceptible. So these are the ways that climate begins to play out on a justice level, and we have to think about when we make this transition to a zero carbon economy, how can we learn from the past mistakes around making sure that we don't leave behind the folks in that transition? Community solar is a way in some places on the continent now, and we're getting it here soon. It's been soon for years now, but it's coming. Where if you're a renter, you can still avail yourselves of solar panels. You can buy solar panels in a larger plot and make sure that your energy bill does not continue to rise, that it stays steady or falls. There's programs now coming up in California for folks who have to drive the longest and maybe have an older model car. They can get a credit that's disproportionate to their income or to the distance they drive to get a much more efficient car. And in fact, we've got this red pickup truck sticking out of here. Ford is coming out with a F-150 hybrid truck next year in 2020. And there's an electric truck that just got released at the LA Auto Show that should come on later. But what the issue is, though, is we need to make sure that, because these cars, so hybrids and electric cars are actually much cheaper to operate. And so it's more money in your pocket if you're able to drive one. The problem is the cost of them is higher right now. It's coming down. We want to make sure that the bar is, that we can get people that most need to save those dollars and decrease their cost of living into that kind of transportation. And then Energy Smart for Homes, that's a Hawaii Energy program. It's available to anybody, any renter, and you can get basically a home makeover for energy efficiency, cut your energy bill. And these are the kind of things that we need to make sure occur as we move to a zero carbon economy. So if we think of ourselves, being in that car, so if you were walking across a huge open parking lot in the sun and you saw a car with all the windows rolled up and a puppy inside, would you break that window and let the puppy out? How many people would do that?
I'll check if the door's open first.
So, checking if the door's open. I mean, if there's a toddler in the car, would you break the window or check the door and open it up? Right, you would. So the thing is we are all sitting inside this car getting warmer and warmer, and we have to break the window. We have to do something different. We have to change the system in order to make sure that we can survive, adapt, and thrive in a completely different world that's growing up around us. We always talk about if you want things to stay the same for us on an island, we have to change. If we just stay the same, change is going to happen further and faster around us. Okay, so we've talked about this ticking time bomb of climate. And when you have to get rid of a time bomb, what do you have to do? Anybody? You got to snip the wires, right? And you have to snip them in the right order, because if you snip them in the wrong order, it's going to blow. So what we're asking you to do tonight here around the tables is tell us which wires you think we ought to snip first, and in order from 2025, 2035, 2045, so that we can get this right. Because the climate action plan that we develop is only as strong as what the community wants to see in it, right? And the order that they want to see progress. So, anybody know who these guys are over to the right?
The B team.
So this guy, the head of the B team, the A team, do anybody know what he says at the end of the episode every time? Anybody remember back that far? No? All right, I'll go to Plan B team then. Who's this guy? What's he always say?
Pity the fool.
I pity the fool. Right on. Here's your "We Are Still In" hat for your. I should have given you a hat for check the door first. So Hannibal always says, "I love it when a plan comes together." At the end of the episode, right? It's total chaos. Everybody's running everywhere. There is no plan at all. But then at the end, miraculously, it all comes together and they save the day, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to do here today, is like, we haven't had a plan to fully address this. We're trying to put together a climate action plan to make sure that we can save the day and come out of this all right. So what I'd like to do now is Rocky Mold, who's our energy program manager and helped develop the game that's in front of you. He's going to give a very short overview of what's on your table and what tiles you're playing and how the game works. All right? Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Welcome, everybody. So I'm going to try to be brief here and explain a little bit about this game in front of on your table. I'm also going to explain climate action planning a little bit, because part of the Paris Climate Accord commitment for the city is to develop a climate action plan, and this game kind of simulates what we're going to have to do when we do that climate action plan. Oh, wrong way, sorry. So climate action planning is a process where a number of cities and jurisdictions are doing around the world, across the country. Actually, one of our consultants, this shows some of the places where they've helped other jurisdictions do climate action plans. So we're following a process that a lot of other cities have followed. Again, it's part of the Paris Climate Agreement. And essentially, a climate action plan consists of three main components. The first component is a greenhouse gas inventory. And what that is a snapshot of the carbon pollution that your jurisdiction is putting into the air in a given year. And what you need to do is you use that to then start planning for how to reduce those emissions to whatever target you set. Second process is developing targets and target years. And then the third is figuring out the strategies that you're going to use to reduce carbon emissions based on those targets. And so you'll see on these game boards on your table, you'll see that we're trying to reduce emissions down to 0 by 2045. And of course, there's a fourth component of climate action planning, and that's what we're doing right now here. We're bringing this out to the community to get your feedback about what you think about what the viable strategies are to reduce emissions. We're also bringing this out here so you can get a feel for the kinds of things, the kinds of trade-offs that we're going to have to think about as we develop our climate action plan and our emissions reduction strategies. So at the end of the day, what are we trying to do in a climate action plan? As Josh mentioned, this is not adaptation. This is about reducing and eliminating the root causes of climate change, carbon emissions. And what is that? So we're trying to basically reduce our fuel use over time. The main culprit for climate emissions on Oahu is crude oil. We bring barrels of crude oil in, and then that crude oil is turned into gas for your cars and oil for energy generation at the utility, and then natural gas. You probably recognize right here, this is Kahe Generating Station. This is the largest generating station from HECO, right around the corner from here. A lot of people don't know, we also have a really big coal footprint here on Oahu. Coal is the most carbon intensive feedstock for fuel generation. So we're trying to reduce that as well. Actually, the station is right near here at the AES power plant. HECO, our utility, has a contract with them going through 2022. And so this right here shows Oahu's energy mix. And what you'll see here is, we're still at like 64% oil and 19% coal. So for every time you flip on a switch and use electricity, that's burning 83% fossil fuels and putting carbon emissions into the air. So what we're trying to do through climate action planning is eliminate that as economically feasible and efficiently as possible. Luckily, the state has had some great renewable energy policies so far, and we're making a lot of progress on our electric grid with renewable energy. We have an 100% RPS portfolio, which means by 2045, the state's goal is to reduce emissions to generate all its electricity from renewable fuels. And you'll notice this blue line up here shows, we're making some significant progress in our electricity generation sector, on our electric grid. In fact, Oahu, as of 2017, was about 21% renewable energy on its grid. Most of that was from rooftop solar that you see all around us. But you'll notice in ground transportation, the red line, we haven't really made that much progress. So a lot of the city's policies, where the rubber meets the road, are about addressing the transportation emissions that we're producing. So where are we in our climate action planning process? As I mentioned, there are 3 steps. We've completed the first step, which is we've developed a 2015 greenhouse gas inventory for the city and county jurisdiction. What this shows is about half of our emissions come from energy use, from the grid and from fuel, and the other half comes from transportation. So this climate action planning, this game that we're about to take you through, is about how we take this inventory, this amount of carbon pollution, and take it down to 0 over time. So you'll see in front of you a game board on the table, and this is a climate action planning simulation game. We're going to have a bunch of facilitators at each table. They're going to help you go through this game, and I'm going to give you a preview of what we're going to ask you to do. This here is the game board, and what you'll see here, this is 2015, and this goes across to 2025, 2035, and 2045. And what this bar chart represents is that greenhouse gas inventory that I showed you before. That represents all of our carbon pollution as of 2015. And the different colors are breaking it down into different sectors. And actually the orange is energy, and the teal is transportation, the purple is aviation, and you'll see that in front of you. It's right here actually. So in that inventory, you'll see in 2025 there's a bar chart next to the other chart. And what we're going to ask you to do is chart a course to 0% emissions by 2045, which is the state's goal. And so we're kind of using that as a backstop at the city right now in our planning. And what we're going to want you to do is chart this green line for each year by picking a set of strategies. So these strategies, in orange, that's renewable energy strategies or energy efficiency. Again, the teal are transportation emissions reduction strategies. And then the gray are kind of waste reduction and other fuel uses and renewable fuels. And so what we're going to ask you to do is place, so each of these strategies is represented in a tile. And each of those tiles represents a certain amount of emissions reductions for that strategy. So this game is backed up by a model, and there's a lot of math behind it that went into determining these strategies and how much emissions reductions each of those strategies equals. So each of those tiles equals 625,000 metric tons of carbon pollution. And the game actually has some rules about how many of those tiles you can place of different colors for different strategies. And all of that, again, is based on this model that we're using to do our climate action planning. So, I'll take you through some of the strategies that are available to you. So in the renewable energy category, of course you have rooftop solar. This is a distributed source of renewable energy. And there's it's a driver of our economy, and so that has a lot of bonuses. Again, there are large solar farms as well. Large solar farms, these are some of the trade-offs between the strategies. Large solar farms are a little less expensive than rooftop solar, but they also take up more space. Another mitigation measure is energy efficiency. This is really the low-hanging fruit of renewable energy. So the more you can reduce your own energy usage, the less you have to displace with renewable energy. So solar hot water is a very prominent and popular energy efficiency strategy. It reduces the average household bill by about 30% with solar hot water. And also LEDs, more advanced lighting. And of course, there's onshore wind. We have a significant amount of wind on Oahu, up at Kauai Loa and in Kahuku. There's offshore wind. Believe it or not, there are actually a number of companies who have proposals that they want the state to take a look at. There are biofuels. Who's seen this company before? Pacific Biodiesel. Basically, these trucks, they're backed by Willie Nelson. He's one of their backers, by the way, the country singer. These trucks go around and collect waste oil from restaurants and other places, and then they refine that into a biofuel for use in electricity generation or transportation. And as Josh mentioned, we're prototyping, we have a goal to go 100% renewable. This is one of the electric buses that we prototyped. So we're starting to put the plans in place to restructure all of our routes and our rates and our electric charging stations to be able to handle 100% electrified bus system by 2035. And so we're already starting that process. And of course, walking and biking is one of the best carbon mitigation strategies that we have, because it's $0 per gallon. And so a lot of our rail and our transit-oriented development policies and programs are about getting people walking and biking, getting people closer to where they work and where they shop and where they live without having to get into a car. And then of course there are electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging networks. And aviation, believe it or not, there are some more and more aviation fuels are becoming renewable, and so renewable aviation is becoming viable. It's a little further out, but it's coming. And there's marine vessel fuels, and of course this is really important because we get all of our food. Our marine supply lines from California are really where we store all of our inventory, right, for our food for the coming days and weeks. So this is really important to us. But it is a source of carbon emissions that we need to address over time. And of course there are things we can do that actually suck carbon dioxide out of the air without putting in planting trees, agroforestry, reforesting areas, and the like, to suck carbon out of the air. So these are the strategies you're going to have to choose from at your game boards as we go forward. And so for each year, You're going to get about 10 minutes, and we're going to want you to discuss with your facilitator and your, and the rest of the other members at your table to try to choose strategies to place tiles in these areas to achieve this reduction to 0 by 2045.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
I got a question. In this equation, in this game, I don't see the military in it. It would be nice if the military was here, because they're one of the biggest contributors of the emissions, and they don't have any regulations on the emissions coming out of their vehicles that they drive, as opposed to civilians. So I think there would be a big part if the military was in here.
So there's a
Getting them.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So there's a couple things in relation to that answer. One is, we can only take care of our Kuleana here in terms of, we don't.
Yeah, but they're one of the
have
biggest
federal
factors in that.
But so we, as a local government, we can't tell the federal government what to do, right?
But
So
then that
they
affects
have to
all
deal
of
with
us.
that.
It affects all of us.
It does. But the military also has several goals within the military that were imposed around renewable energy on base, around energy efficiency. We do have a sort of it's a workshop with the Marines for Kaneohe next in January, where we're going to talk about shared goals around renewable energy for the island. In fact, the military, obviously with transportation and jets and stuff, they're burning a ton of fuel. But they see one of their biggest threats to their mission not having energy security. And so what that means on an island is that they want local source renewable fuels to make sure that they can function regardless of what's coming in and out of the island.
And I should mention, military is included in this, and the military portion that's included in this is the portion that military members, would drive their personal cars around. All of that, all of their personal consumption is in that gray box, and it's just there's not enough of emissions from that source to warrant having one of those pieces for the game. But it's in there as a strategy, and we are counting military use of motor gasoline. That's definitely part of our inventory. But again, the jet fuels and the fuel they use for their boats, this sort of strategic, military defense stuff is not.
So we got one more question, but then we're going to need to get started so we don't get behind.
Could you explain to us the difference between carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide? They're not the same. Would you agree?
Clearly not, since the names are different.
Could you explain to us what the difference is?
Yeah. Yes, carbon monoxide is actually a very poisonous gas.
That's right.
It's CO. So so carbon dioxide is carbon with 2 oxygen molecules on it.
So
Carbon
why
monoxide
is it
carbon
called
with 1.
a greenhouse gas?
Because carbon, that's a good question. I think
I can answer it for you.
are basically 6 categories of gases that scientists around the world have agreed are going into our atmosphere and causing a greenhouse effect.
There would be no life without CO2. That's why it's called the greenhouse
Absolutely.
gas. It is essential for nature to grow. Without it, we die.
Yeah, and with too much of it, it compromises.
So you need to be specific. Carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is the pollutant. Carbon dioxide is not.
Yeah. And
That's what the science says, not me.
And so at a certain level, even something that's good for you becomes dangerous. Okay, so what we want to do is jump in. So we give a little bit more time for the first year because it's you've got more tiles to choose from. I want to clarify too on this that while there's a lot of math behind this and there's a lot of sort of estimations and certain numbers of pounds of this and that, it's not necessary to know the background on that for this, because what we're actually asking you as community members, what are the things you want to see first? And there may be some disagreement around which tiles you want to see in 2025, how you want to transition, and it might be different around the island. That's why we're doing these meetings all the way around the island, so that every single district has input around, here's the things I'd like to see on our island in the first in 2025, and then the decade after. And what this helps us do is prioritize and start to figure out what's the infrastructure needed to enable the steps that we need to take in order to reduce the fossil fuel consumption on it. So with that, if you is everybody at a table in terms of a facilitator? Everybody got a facilitator? Raise your hand if you're a facilitator. Okay. All right, good. So everybody's got one. I'm going to start the timer now. And we're going to go 15 minutes for 2025, okay? All right.